Good morning, everyone. We are delighted you could join us on this April morning, and welcome to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency 4-hour course with hands-on labs, Introduction to CDM Enabled Threat Hunting, or CETH, using the CDM Agency Dashboard. My name is Joe Bukovac, and I am part of the academic section of the DHS CISA Cybersecurity Division as the CDM Dashboard Training Team Lead. Today, the training goal was to provide you with the basics of CDM and CETH, which is the key component in responding to the current governmental directives, such as executive orders and binding operational directives. Throughout the course, you'll be provided with numerous CDM resources, references, and lab scenarios so you can maintain your skills in this changing environment. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce today's instructors and then share some disclaimers. Today, we have Adrian and John as our instructors. Adrian Shepard is from Motorola Solutions and has over 18 years of experience in the cybersecurity field, including 7 years supporting CDM. For 16 years, Adrian has supported the DoD community and the United States government's efforts in cyber defense. Some cool things to know about Adrian is that during his cybersecurity career, he has done dumpster diving, social engineering, and finding many eye-raising issues while doing cyber assessments. Adrian has served in the United States Air Force and is a retired cyber protection team member. Mr. John Stufflebeam also works for Motorola Solutions and has over 14 years of experience in the cybersecurity course development and instruction field. John has supported the DHS CISA CDM training program for more than 6 years. One of the cool things about John is that during his cyber career, he has traveled globally, including some high threat posts, teaching cybersecurity courses. John served in the United States Navy, where he performed systems integration and combat information center tactical team training. Now, a few disclaimers before we get started. Today's course is being recorded through WebEx. There is no dial-in for this session, and audio is in listen-only mode. CISA and DHS does not endorse, recommend, or favor any commercial product or service mentioned during this session. Please be aware that the use case data in our labs and demonstrations is simulated, and no production data is used for demonstration and training purposes. Additionally, please note the following sensitive information disclaimer. Be aware that this CDM Agency Dashboard training event is live and is being recorded and may be made public for the benefit of other students. Events such as these are attended by people from many different federal agencies. As a student, please do not disclose any agency-sensitive information or personally identifiable information during the event. CISA has a commenting policy addressing the rules of behavior regarding chat during virtual trainings. Everyone's input during class discussion is vital in making the course a better learning experience for everyone. The CDM training team provides 12 hands-on virtual courses and live in-person trainings, including one coming up next month in Arlington, Virginia. We also have dozens of new and updated microlearn videos, which are currently available on FedVTE, so please check them out. If someone you know would like to be added to our training membership list, or if you have training-related questions, please send us an email at cyberinsights@cisa.dhs.gov. At the conclusion of today's course, you'll be asked to answer a few survey questions, which will be found in the virtual learning environment. This survey is where you will have the opportunity to provide your course feedback, and we value your opinion as your comments help to improve this and all the CDM courses we teach. Thanks again for attending. It is now time to jump into the course and the CDM dashboard and CETH. I would like to introduce Mr. Adrian Shepard, who will begin today's presentation.
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's training. I think you have should be a good time for everyone. Before I get started, I want to thank everyone for attending yesterday's tech check. So if you had the opportunity to hopefully work through any technical issues in regards to accessing our environment, hopefully we were able to address those. For those individuals that have not been able to log into the environment, please feel free to reach out in the chat. Send us a message, let us know, and we'll get to you as soon as possible. Just ask that you be patient with us. We'll have a chance before we start today's labs. We'll do a walkthrough of the environment, and so you'll get that one last opportunity if you haven't had a chance to log in, if you need a password reset, any type of any technical issue in regards to that, we'll be able to address that then. All right. So next, what I'm going to talk about is WebEx functions. So this is more so for those individuals that have not had a chance to attend one of our classes and may be new to the WebEx platform. So I'm just going to briefly cover some of the highlights here. So for today's webinar, it'll be in listen-only mode, and your microphones will be muted. But if you click the arrow next to the unmute button at the bottom of the platform, you can view the speaker selection. There you can select your speaker or headset, and this should solve any audio issues you might be having. I think someone posted from our team posted in the chat. In the event that you still have issues, you may need to leave the session and rejoin, and just make sure, if possible, make sure you're not on any type of VPN connection. Sometimes that causes some latency and some delays. We don't have any videos today, so that should help for this. The other thing is, if you're using the browser versus the app, we've noticed some issues with that in regards to slides not being visible. And so what we've told people is, if you can use the app, please use the app. And like I said, hopefully, since we don't have any videos today, we should be smooth sailing. Another thing, so as we leave today's event, or as we end today's event, Joe mentioned the feedback survey. So what you're going to do is, when we leave the event today, you're going to click the ellipsis next to the red X, and you'll find some, also along with that, you'll see some additional WebEx functions. From there, you can also switch your audio source from there as well. And so that's the big red X. So remember that. You can choose different layouts by clicking the layout button in the upper right of the screen. You just click layouts and then make your selection. There's also an expand screen option there as well. At the bottom of the menu bar, there's what looks like to be a raise the hand icon, I guess. That's what I'd consider it. And it's also next to the happy face symbol. So this is your raise the hand icon and the emoji icon. I don't think we have any raise your hand questions today, but in the event we do, you would just click the raise the hand, and so that would allow you to raise your hand in regards to the response to the questions. And then you would just click it to let it down. You can click the smiley face to access any of the emojis. You can use that to respond to questions. We may ask you can you respond with a turtle selection? And so you would click the smiley face and then respond with that. Let's see here. Now, if you have a question during the presentation, please post in the chat panel. I definitely recommend you display the chat panel so you can view comments from other students as well as answer questions from the instructors. You can pop out the chat panel and move it around. You can resize it if necessary, but if you do pop it out, that usually helps with making it visible when answering other questions. All right. Talked about leaving today's webinar, addressed that already. Let's see. Now we will have at least one polling question today, which will pop out on the right side of your screen. And so you just make your selection and type your response and then click submit, and that's all you need to do. We'll capture the results. Closed captioning is available for today's session. Okay, we have two options for you. So one of them is on the right side of the platform. And so you're going to click the ellipsis on the lower right corner, then select multimedia viewer, and then follow the prompts. This will allow you to see the closed captionings in a panel in itself on the right. The other option, down in the lower left corner, there's a CC icon. If you click that, it'll then populate and start the closed captioning. And I think, if I remember correctly, the closed captioning will appear at the bottom, somewhat centered on the screen, but in the bottom. So that just a preference there on which one you would prefer to use. And then lastly, as Joe mentioned already, after the course today, there will be a feedback survey in the CVLE for you to fill out. Once it's complete, you'll be able to download your certificate of attendance. So make sure you get credit for today's course. We definitely, in advance, I want to just say we greatly appreciate your feedback. So thank you for taking the time or a few minutes to give us your thoughts. All right, I think that covers everything from that aspect. Now let's go ahead and talk about today's course. Well, today we're going to start off by covering the mission and purpose of CETH, or CDM Enabled Threat Hunting. We'll also take a look at some federal laws that are driving the CETH initiative. We'll talk about the responsibilities for agencies in CISA and the role of the federal dashboard as it relates to CETH. We have some hands-on labs where you'll be able to search for vulnerabilities, and then we'll talk about remediation and reporting. And during our conclusion, we'll share some additional training resources and give you the opportunity to provide some feedback on the course today. And so, once again, we greatly appreciate your response. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to John, who's going to get us started with an overview of CETH.
All right, thank you, Adrian, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're glad to have you. So let's take a look at CDM Enabled Threat Hunting. Now, what is CETH? CETH is the physical architecture which has been adopted to satisfy the CISA requirements for centralized visibility into agencies' endpoint data. Okay, and this provides both the agency and DHS analysts with automated analytics, detection rules, and optimized search features. And it also standardizes views and methods for analyzing security data, which then enables collaboration between Federal Civilian Executive Branch, or FCEB, agencies and CISA. Now, specifically, CETH standardizes routine agency endpoint data collection, indexing, formatting, etc. And it does this through the centralized development of data pipelines and schemas. And it also standardizes the sharing of detection rules, threat intelligence, and the application of machine learning. Now, desired outcomes for the CDM-enabled threat hunting capability include increased visibility both within and across agencies to better identify, track, and mitigate threats. And the ability to automate detections and respond to incidents at scale dramatically improves the risk posture of federal departments and agencies. So let's take a look at some of the benefits of CETH. Okay, so let me just ask a quick question here, and you can answer me in the chat panel. What might be some valuable sources of information that could be used for threat hunting? Okay, and just pop your answer in the chat panel there. What might be some valuable sources of information that could be used for threat hunting? Access logs, okay. KEVs. Known exploited vulnerabilities, okay. Any other takers? Valuable sources of information that could be used for threat hunting. Jack, knowing what systems you have in your environment. Excellent. That's pretty key, actually. You can't secure what you don't know you have, right? So, all right, well, thank you for that. Some things that come to mind when I ask this question are logging. Now, we did talk about access logs a little bit, but process monitoring might be another one. File monitoring. Also, the National Cyber Awareness System, or NCAS, provides information, as well as the National Vulnerability Database. So those might be some sources that you could use as well. Okay, not necessarily related to your system. Okay. Now, the purpose of CETH is to aggregate endpoint telemetry and log data in the CDM Agency Dashboard. And Agency Security Operations Center, or SOC, analysts can create detections and conduct analysis across this data set within the CDM Agency Dashboard. And DHS analysts can search data sets across agencies using the elastic cross-cluster search capability within the federal dashboard. Now, there's a number of benefits to CETH. First of all, it aligns with Executive Order 14028. So that's a big executive order, and you know, any help we can get to support that is key. Okay, so it also provides visibility into threat hunting data sources across CDM agencies from a centralized platform. It applies real-time analytics and detections at the agency and CISA levels, and it also enables automated data sharing, which in turn enables collaboration with agencies on threat intelligence, detection rules, alerts, and playbooks. Now, of course, all this put together makes for an improved security posture for each agency. So, Adrian, tell us a little bit about the CETH solution.
All right. So here are some of the specifics of the CETH solution. I'm going to briefly just highlight some of these things that are identified here on the screen. So threat hunters can compare and correlate host-based indicators of compromise, or IOCs, across agencies and track lateral movement of threat actors across agencies. They can automate detection of malicious activity based on correlation of data collected from SysMon and endpoint detection and response, or EDR solutions. Along with that, they can automate anomaly detection in data to identify potentially malicious behavior. Now, this capability also exists to automatically trigger the collection and forwarding of data when specific criteria are satisfied, so thus reducing the need to collect all data all the time. As we all know, it can be difficult when you're trying to collect all the data. When one is resource intensive, can contribute to a lot of technology, obviously the money that's required, and then storage and space, things of that nature. And since both the agency and CISA are looking at the same information and use the same detection rules and responses, this allows for improved communication of situation awareness of host-based security, right? We can share that information and hopefully be able to help agency A, B, C, D, so on and so on with this information that's being collected, and communicate that to other agencies throughout. And then finally, CETH supplements incident response efforts. So those are just some of the identified specifics of the CETH solution. Now, on the slide, I know it's a bit busy, but it depicts the differences between normal CDM and CETH. So hopefully most of you are familiar with the CDM architecture, the ABCD aspects of it. And so if you are familiar with the ABCD structure of the dashboard, you can see that the normal CDM utilizes all 4 layers. With CETH, the endpoint telemetry is sent directly to the CDM dashboard visualization layer, which we refer to as layer C, and then on to the federal dashboard. Now, it does this by using SysMon and the Elastic Security Model. CISA threat hunters are able to view real-time data using cross-cluster search at the federal dashboard level. Now, in order for endpoint data to be available in your agency dashboard and be available to CISA, agencies should complete a host-level visibility CDM request for service, or what's referred to as an RFS. Now, for those who are not familiar with that process, please feel free to speak to your CDM portfolio lead about that RFS. Now, the next thing we're going to take a look at is federal laws behind CETH. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton back over to John to kind of provide you some information regarding the federal laws.
All right, thank you, sir. So let's take a look here at the biggie. Okay, 14028. Now, in recent years, persistent and sophisticated threats to public and private sector have prompted the federal government to improve its efforts to protect against and respond to cyber threats. And Executive Order 14028 outlines 6 key points, which you see here on the slide. And these key points cover a broad range of topics like information sharing, zero trust architecture, supply chain security, a federal cyber review board, better incident response preparedness, as well as improved remediation capabilities. Now, let me just ask another question and you can reply to me in the chat panel. Which of these points do you think CETH will help to address? Which of these points do you think CETH will help to address? Give you a chance to look over the slide a little bit. There's some clues there. So 5 and 6, standardized cyber incident response and improve remediation capabilities. Bullet 2, implement stronger cybersecurity standards. Okay. Bullet 2, got some bullet 2s coming in. Bullet 5, bullet 1, remove barriers to threat information sharing. Okay, 2 and 5, implement stronger security standards, standardized cyber incident response. Okay, Nicolene says 5, 6, and 2. All right, so there's kind of a wide range of answers here, which is great. Appreciate the participation, you guys. I would argue that CETH could probably support each of these points, but more than likely it's going to play a bigger part in response preparedness and remediation capabilities, as well as information sharing. You know, those are probably the key points where CETH really fits in. Okay. All right, thanks for the participation there, guys. All right, so M2201. Now, in Executive Order 14028, it directs agencies to put in place a robust endpoint detection and response, or EDR, solution to help in shifting the cyber defense from a reactive to a proactive posture, right? As I mentioned a little bit earlier, you can't secure what you don't know you have. So, you know, EDR can improve the federal government's response to threat activity on federal networks. So that's kind of the purpose of it. Okay. Now, M2201 provides guidance to agencies as they adopt EDR solutions, and it works to improve the detection of cybersecurity vulnerabilities. So M2201 covers endpoint detection and response, and some of the objectives include improved detection, response, and remediation of cyber incidents, okay. Visibility across components, bureaus, and sub-agencies to better detect and understand threat activity. And then also government-wide visibility implemented by CISA to support host-level visibility, attribution, and response across federal information systems. And we'll see a little bit more about EDR coming up. We'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, next we have 2201. And on November 3rd of 2021, CISA issued Binding Operational Directive 2201. And the intent was to reduce the risk of known exploited vulnerabilities, or what we call KEVs. And these are known vulnerabilities that have previously been used to pose a significant risk to agencies, and they're frequently used as an attack vector for all types of malicious activity. Okay. Now, the directive establishes a CISA-managed catalog of KEVs that pose significant risk to the federal enterprise. And it establishes requirements for agencies to remediate any vulnerabilities included in the catalog. Okay, so there are lots of old vulnerabilities out there that are continually being exploited. So it's the old stuff, not necessarily the new stuff. And this directive requires agencies to identify those vulnerabilities, and it mandates that they be remediated. And agencies are also required to report their status via the federal dashboard or cyberscope. Okay. So reporting is a key part of it as well. All right, FISMA 2014. I don't think I need to say too much about FISMA because I think everybody's probably familiar with the Federal Information Security Modernization Act. You know, several requirements came into being with the original version of this back in 2002. And there have been a number of incremental updates to FISMA since 2014 even. So, you know, CETH can assist with some of these requirements like risk assessment and remediation and incident detection and response. But in short, there's a number of federal laws, both old and new, that impact cybersecurity efforts today. And basically, they all kind of say the same thing. You know, you need to know your data and your systems, and you need to keep them safe. Okay. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Adrian to talk a little bit about endpoint monitoring. So Adrian, over to you.
All right, thank you. So earlier we spoke about EDR, and so these next few slides take a deeper dive into that topic. All right, so first let's take a look at where your data resides. Now, many of us may still think of everything as being stored on-prem, and so on-prem, if you look here at the bottom, let's see if I can make some annotations here so we can follow along. So here, hopefully you can see my pointer. That's basically your local area network on-prem, your work center. When we, years ago, where we used to mostly function out of. And so in reality, agency information can be in all of the locations that you see on the screen here or on this slide. You know, we got cloud, we have sister sites, remote user locations, the list goes on. And so we have to protect it when it's at rest, when it's in transit. And so when we're talking about it, obviously we know what at rest is, but when it's in transit, so as it's going from site to site, location to location, and then when it's in process. And so when we're talking about in process, you know, it's your user locations and in the cloud, maybe there's someone doing payroll, there's someone else doing, you know, recruitment, there's users here in the remotely, you know, reaching back to a location in the cloud. So it's all being processed. But the concept here, the idea is that data is more dispersed than ever with the growing use of cloud solutions, therefore necessitating the need for more robust monitoring and response solutions, right? We can't just have that idea sitting on the perimeter anymore. We realize there's more technology that needs to be involved and integrated into our solutions. And so with that being said, I do have a question for the group, and you can respond by placing your answer in the chat. Where is your data located? Is it on-prem still? Is it mostly in the cloud? Maybe you have a hybrid solution. What would you identify with? Hybrid, okay. Looks like for most people responding, hybrid is the winner, which makes sense. Obviously, it depends on your mission set, but good to know. Thank you for those responses. With regard to CETH, data is routinely collected from endpoints using Sysmon, the Elastic agent, as well as other EDR solutions. It may be collected directly from endpoints or from a centralized location. So for example, central logging servers, EDR data stores. And so source data is run through a series of detection rules to look for anomalies, correlation with threat intelligence, and patterns that indicate potentially malicious behavior. Along with that, now they have this extended data response, or endpoint response solutions now that have artificial intelligence built into them, machine learning built into them. And so as technology evolves, we incorporate that into our solutions. So with all this information, our alerts and notifications are then generated and then passed to agency analysts. The endpoint detection and response capability that provides cybersecurity monitoring and control of endpoint devices, right? EDR solution. It combines real-time, continuous monitoring and collection of endpoint data with rules-based automated response and analysis capabilities. So this technology spans the full cybersecurity lifecycle. So from the detection of events and incidents on endpoint devices to automated responses to block malicious activity. Now, when compared to traditional security solutions, EDR provides the increased visibility necessary to respond to advanced forms of cybersecurity threats. Moreover, EDR is an essential component for transitioning to zero trust architecture because every device that connects to a network is a potential attack vector for cyber threats. Now, of many things that EDR solutions provide, the biggest one is the collection of endpoint telemetry data. We've mentioned log and telemetry data earlier, but this is the data that provides tremendous value for threat hunters and incident response specialists. And so as we discussed, John mentioned earlier with the federal laws, Executive Order 14028 says agencies must implement an EDR capability and make the data accessible to DHS. Along with that, OMB M-22-01 supports agencies with information and guidance on implementing an EDR solution. Now, the next thing we'll talk about in relation to EDR is host level visibility, or HLV. And the main objectives of HLV is to facilitate the ingest of Sysmon logs into the CDM Agency Dashboard and make Sysmon and log data visible to the CDM Federal Dashboard. It is being developed as a pilot program utilizing out-of-the-box Elastic products along with Sysmon to provide agencies with system-level logging capabilities. For the HLV pilot program, Sysmon is required, and it's being used as the data collector. Elastic Agent, which is optional, is configured to be the data shipper from layer A to layer C, and Elasticsearch, which is also required, will store the data in indices. Now, Sysmon is required to be used as the log generator for HLV, but the Elastic Agent or any other Elastic product isn't required to ship the data to layer C. If it's decided against using the Elastic Agents, then the agency is required to produce their own solution to ensure the data is configured and stored properly. First and foremost, the data should be configured to match the Elastic Common Schema, or ECS, and the indexing naming convention and the index template. HLV works with the agency's EDR solution in that it makes agency host data readily available or accessible via the agency dashboard. And then the data is then standardized so it can be easily analyzed by agency and CISA threat hunters at scale. Analysts can also leverage the dashboard analytics platform for hunting threats within detailed host data with the aid of automation and machine learning. And finally, as mentioned a moment ago, the HLV complements EDR by giving analysts the ability to pivot from a centralized common view to the agency's EDR solution for additional investigation and action. All right, we got to be able to act upon this information. All right. So that sums up the EDR and HLV visibility capabilities. What I'm going to do now is hand it back over to John to cover some of the agency responsibilities related to CETH.
All right, thank you. So let's take a look here. Some of the agency responsibilities. Now, with regard to CETH, agencies should establish or update their memo of agreement, or MOA, with CISA for the CDM program. And that should include identification and engagement of agency stakeholders, including agency project sponsors and Security Operations Center personnel, or SOC personnel. Okay. And these are the end users of CETH, really. And a CETH rollout, planning, change management, communications, training, all of this should be considered. Okay. Now, object level data must be made available to CISA through SysMon, the Elastic Security Module, and EDR solutions. And agencies must initiate reporting functionality to the federal dashboard. I think most agencies have done reporting, or at least BOD reporting up through the federal dashboard. So I think a lot of agencies are probably at this point already. Okay. Now, to the extent appropriate, and in collaboration with your system integrator, you're going to facilitate the deployment and configuration of additional solution components within the agency environment. And then finally, you need to identify a CETH administrator, who's going to be able to define and manage policies from the Kibana interface and provide Tier 1 support services for agency CETH users. So there has to be somebody basically on site, I guess, is for lack of a better term, to help out with this. All right, so what are CISA's responsibilities? So CISA's primary mission is to lead the national effort in understanding and managing cyber and physical risk to our critical systems and infrastructure. So where CETH is concerned, though, the threat hunting team will engage in analysis of threats and incidents from the federal dashboard, which may involve the query of object level data within and across agencies. So basically, being able to perform analytics at scale. The DHS security practitioners may be granted access to EDR consoles, which then allows them visibility into the EDR capability and its associated data sets. And EDR data must be available to CISA threat hunters as well. Now, the threat hunting team will also provide requirements for the fulfillment of the CETH solution through participation in planning and design, working sessions, and analysis and testing. And then finally, they'll engage in incident management and response according to the threat hunting ConOps. So let's talk a little bit about these DHS CISA threat hunters. These guys and gals are positioned at the federal level and will use the federal dashboard to conduct threat hunting activities. Okay. They're able to view as well as review agency data using cross-cluster searches and EDR data. They maintain the SysMon configuration, which basically specifies initial events to be collected and reported on through CETH. They also engage in analysis of threats and incidents using the federal dashboard, which we mentioned a moment ago. Okay. And this may involve the query of object level data within and across agencies. Now, again, using cross-cluster searching, they have the ability to prescribe common detection rules to be configured across all participating agency dashboards. And then finally, it's possible for them to define and implement process requirements for case management to include things like incident management and response. So that's a big one. All right, a little bit here about the federal dashboard. Now, the CDM federal dashboard gives federal decision makers visibility across all federal networks in order to better understand how participating agencies are managing their cyber risk and to ultimately improve cybersecurity across the federal government. And the information retrieved through this dashboard helps determine if additional resources, guidance, policies, or directives are needed to improve risk management at the agency level. Okay, so threat hunting is triggered either by schedule or an external stimulus, such as an alert from CISA, agency detections, agency requests, or threat intelligence. All these different sources. And this is implemented through object-level access to all Elasticsearch data stores from the federal dashboard using that cross-cluster searching. And this way, the data it's not duplicated, and only a single version is maintained at the agency level. Okay. I think Adrian mentioned you don't want to get into the business of collecting a lot of data because it's resource intensive. So this way, it all remains at the agency level. Okay. And based on the findings, CISA may update detection rules, policies, and playbooks, or even threat intelligence, depending on what they find. Okay. And the federal dashboard is a key component in being able to visualize information about assets and vulnerabilities from a central location, and to identify and respond to threats as they materialize across the federal enterprise. All right. So at this point, we've reached the hands-on portion of today's course. And this is going to provide everyone with an opportunity to practice and get familiar with the agency dashboard in our range environment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adrian to get us started with the first lab of the day.
All right, thank you, John. Just give me one moment while I get set up. And so the first lab we're going to get into is going to talk about identifying KEVs and affected endpoints. So what I'm going to do is share my screen first to kind of walk you through the environment. So for those individuals that have not had a chance to log into the CVLE, this will provide you a quick demonstration of that process. So let me get set up. All right, now hopefully everyone can see my screen. If not, it should appear here shortly. Here. All right, so this is our CVLE. You have two options in regards to the login to the CVLE. You can use your DHS smart card, which you just insert your smart card and it does the magic behind the scenes, or you can log in with the non-DHS login, which is a username and a password. This information should have been sent to you in an email. If this is your first time, if this is not your first time, you should have already set up a username, which is your registered email address, and then a unique password. So if you do not have that information, please reach out to us in the chat panel and we'll try to assist you. All right, I'm going to log in with my DHS smart card. And I see that someone needs this. Hold on. Oh, looks like somebody got the link. Thank you, Rhonda. All right. So once you log in, whether it be through username, password, or DHS smart card, you're going to wait a few moments and a verification code will be sent to your email. I just received mine, but what I will say is it could take anywhere from a couple of seconds all the way up to 5 minutes. We ask that you wait the 5 minutes. After that 5 minutes, if you still have not received that code, you're going to go ahead and click this I didn't receive a code button, and that will start the process over again. Couple of things to note. Sometimes it gets filtered depending on the agency. So, different controls, different filtering. And so we ask that you look in your spam, junk, or any other associated inbox first before you give up or scream, uncle. So check those folders first due to the filtering that may be in place. After that, you still don't see it. Like I said, go ahead and click this I didn't receive a code, and then it'll start the process over again. If you go through that process and you still don't receive it, reach out to us and we can try to assist you. So as I mentioned, I do have my code now. So let me bring up my email. So in that email, it's going to come from the edgesource.net domain. As you can see here, it'll tell you that you have a confirmation code. And in that email, it'll have a code or a link, or it actually has both. You can choose either or. I'm going to copy the code this time. With that code, I'm going to just paste it here. If I chose the actual link, it would just open up into the CVLE. So it bypasses that requirement. Oh, sorry, lost my mouse. So this is our form of multi-factor authentication, our MFA. Once you have the code, just go ahead and click Verify Code. Once you verify the code, it'll take you to the welcome page, as you can see here. Welcome, Adrian. And it'll list all the courses that you registered for. For today's training, we are concerned with CDM 210, CDM Enabled Threat Hunting. So once you find it, just go ahead and click on that title. It's going to take you to the course page, provide you some brief information. It talks about the labs that we're going to perform today. So as you can see, there's 3. Someone earlier mentioned regarding this, talked about the slides. So you can download the slides. They're available for you. You just click the link here and it will download it locally. The same thing for the lab guides. For today's labs, you will need the lab guides to perform the steps for this part of the training. So make sure you have that. That would be the first piece of this of the lab work or hands-on portion of today's course. There's a supplemental resources section. Yesterday during the tech check, I mentioned some of the information that's here, but for those who did not attend, here you have some related information or documents in regards to today's course. You can download them individually, or you can download them as a folder. Really up to you on what you want to take away from today's course, but you have those 2 options. Once you finish, you just click the back button, and that takes you back to the course page. So just remember, this course page is where a lot of the information is maintained in regards to our LMS piece. We mentioned, I'm going to skip the lab piece for just a moment. We mentioned the feedback survey. So after today's course, as we end, there's a feedback survey that will be available after today's course. You're going to just go ahead and click on here. Go ahead and fill it out. It should be all multiple choice. I think there's roughly 10 questions. Respond to that. And after that, your course completion certificate will be available for download. All right. So pretty easy. But if you have any questions, please let us know. I know it can a lot of navigating that's involved here. So just remember, the course page is where a lot of the information is maintained. And so slides, lab guides, supplemental information, the feedback survey, and then your course certificate. Once again, if you have any issues, just reach out to us in the chat panel. We'll make sure we can assist you. Now, one thing to note, the certificate of completion is only available 72 hours after the class. After that 72-hour period, it's no longer available. So you want to make sure you at least go in and download that, which requires you to do the survey and requires the class to be finished. So, all right, let's go back up. We have the lab activities and student range section. So if I click on student range, within here, it provides you a link to the CDM range, which is here, and some credentials. Don't worry about the credentials right now. Currently, the way that our system is deployed, you don't have to worry about logging in. So we've kind of bypassed that, at least temporarily. What we're going to do is go ahead and click Launch and Range. Give it a moment to load, and you may get this. Sometimes you can click the refresh, or it may refresh on its own. That's going to take you to the Select Your Space screen. Now, hopefully everybody that's following along, I'm not going too fast, but if I am, please stop me. But if you don't say anything, we're going to keep moving forward. But this, like I mentioned, this is the Select Your Space screen. And then from this point, we're going to follow the lab. We're going to start with lab number 1, which in your guide is on page 3. And so the learning objective for this lab is to identify endpoints associated with a specific vulnerability in the Known Exploited Vulnerabilities, or KEV catalog. All right. So if we're following along, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and get you started, make sure everybody kind of has that same, we're working on the same sheet of music. So this lab, we're going to give you roughly about 15 minutes. But like I said, I want to get everybody started first to make sure we're on the same page. The first thing we want to do is we're going to go into the agency dashboard, right? So I'm going to go into the agency dashboard space. All right. Now, I call this my dashboard indicator. This lets me know which dashboard that I'm currently viewing. As you can see here, this is the agency overview. So this is really a lot of high-level information regarding the agency. So the metrics that are being reported. As we go throughout today's labs, there may be a time where you have to modify the date of the data that you're viewing, right? So it's a certain time set within, right, what we're looking at right now, it's the last 30 days. And as you can see, nothing's being reported. That's because within our training environment, data gets ingested within a certain time period. Whenever it's outside of that time period, the numbers are going to be skewed, right? And we don't ingest constantly. So we pick a certain time. Our labs are meant to focus on that time. And so anything outside of that is going to be a little off. So just make sure you're paying attention to the time period. If it suggests that you modify it, I think if it does, it's probably going to use the last 1 year. But if you wanted to change, the default is the last 30 days. If we wanted to change that, I click this calendar drop down. And then you see you have quick select, which you can do the last, next, and then put in a time period. And then days, seconds, minutes, all that, years, whatever you want to do. So in this case, I can do the last 1 year. The other thing is they have a commonly used section, which allows you to quickly populate it based upon a time period. So let's just say if I wanted to do the last year, I would click on that. And as you can see, the numbers populate. So just pay attention to that. Now, once I've used that last 1 year time frame, it's then stored in my recently used date ranges. So you can see here, last 1 year is now a quick select option for me, or a last used date range. All right. And I don't think we go outside of that for these labs, but once again, just pay attention to the actual steps that are provided to you. All right. So this is a pretty visual picture. So for those individuals who have never seen it, this is what it looks like. I'm not going to go into great details about that because this class really doesn't focus on that. Later on, we have a chance to register, and we have some other courses that really focus on getting more familiar with the dashboard and some of the more the prettier metrics and visualizations that are available for you. All right, so we're in the agency dashboard. We're in the agency overview at this point in time. The next thing they tell you, so that would be step one. The next thing they want you to do is go ahead and select the 3 bars in the upper left of the screen. So this would be step 2, if you're following along. And then from the drop down, select Discover. All right, so when they're talking about the 3 bars, sometimes some of the instructors call it the hamburger or the pancake icon. It's a navigation drawer. If you click on that, you go under Analytics, you have a Discover section. So if you click the Discover, and you'll instantly see the difference in the visualization piece of it, right? Very text-based, a lot of numbers, a lot of metrics, information is coming across. Not as high level as the other dashboard view that I just mentioned. Now, what they usually tell you to do is click New. Many times, if you're doing a lot of work in the dashboard, you want to make sure to reset your filters. That way, you don't have any artifacts from the previous filter. And it tells you to select New. That's the purpose of that. So you just kind of get into the act of it. Since we haven't performed any filters or added any queries, not so much of a big deal, but we want to kind of get you in the act of being familiar with that button or that option or tool. From here, they're going to ask you to select the KEV dictionary, right, from the data view dropdown. All right, so the data view here, you see right by default, it's CDM underscore star. If I click on that, populate some information here under this data view section. So you can either scroll down until you find it, which in this case it's there, or in this box here, this is your data view finder. So you could type and it would match the syntax of whatever you're typing. So KEV, in this case, KEV dictionary, right? And so we want to find that. Oh, I'm sorry, once again, my mouse is freezing on me. KEV dictionary. Now, if you were paying attention, you would notice as I went from the default CDM star to the KEV dictionary, the number that we're seeing has changed. We can do that again just so you can kind of see. So we see that there's over 53 million hits here. These are documents, right, that are stored within this data store or within Elasticsearch. Once I change it, you can see we went down to 1,000, right? Big difference. So just pay attention to that. Make sure you're selecting the correct data view that's available, right, based upon the steps that are in the lab guide. So if you select anything 1 off, 2 off, you're going to be in a completely different data view, and there may be different documents. And as you can see, there's a big difference between CDM star and the KEV dictionary. So, and along with that, as you go through that, we have things called fields and attributes that are different within each one of the data views. And so that's why you might not be able to, you say, hey, that field's not available. Well, make sure you select or you're verifying that you're in the correct data view. All right, so we have that. And so as you can probably imagine, within the KEV dictionary, there's information that's specific to KEVs, right? So vulnerability related information. Continue to go down. They're going to ask you to select some fields, and this is probably what I'm going to stop. I'm going to go ahead and select a field so you can kind of see, go through that process. But the rest of it, I'm going to let you continue on. We're going to put a timer up on the clock or on the screen, and then we'll let you go on your way. But here, now right now, the way that it's set up, and this may be in some latency from when I was testing earlier, but right now you can't see the fields. There's a expand, minimize screen for what we call this document table here in a minute. I mean, in the middle of the screen. To minimize it and actually see the fields that you want to add to this table, you click this little selector here, or the expand button, right? Now, as you'll see, this becomes important as you add more fields. Anytime you get probably more than 4 or 5, it becomes difficult to see if you don't have it expanded. And so after you've added your fields, you probably want to say, okay, you know what, I don't need to see the fields anymore. I just want to see the document table and see all the information how it's organized. All right, so everybody knows what that is. But as we go to add fields, once again, like I showed you with the data view, you can actually, there's a search section here that you can search based upon the field you want to add. Now, in this case, available fields, there's only 8 in this section. So it shows available fields, and it shows you how many are available. And there's only 8. The most popular ones, so these are the ones that are associated that seem to come up the most, are listed in blue. If there were any other ones, they would be listed here at the bottom, as you can see. Since there's not a lot, there may be some data views that have hundreds of fields. It just depends on how they set up the schema. But with this one, it's pretty easy. We're going to add kev.description. Next to that title, scroll over to the right, click the blue plus sign, which adds the field to the table. All right, so we can see the numbers of hits haven't changed. It's now organized different. And as we add more fields, it becomes more organized. It provides information in columns versus, I would say, a scrolling screen of text. Next, we want kev.cve.id. Do the same thing. You find it, hit the plus sign next over to the right. Boom. Once again, we haven't modified anything. Kev.date_added. Kev name, our dot name, and then kev.required_action. Pretty easy. All right. And now once I finish adding the fields, okay, I'm done with that. I'm going to click the little expand. Now, another option, like I said, if it was one that had many fields available, I would just go into the search field names and then type Kev, And then it would tell me anything that has KEV in its name based upon the syntax match. See? Let's just say, is there anything that has vol in the name? And you can see if I type vol, nothing within this data view is associated with vol. All right. I'm going to click the expand table button. And as you can see, it becomes a lot easier. All this is all the information that we saw earlier before we added the fields. And so at the top here, horizontally, you have the field name. And then this is all the data or the values that are associated with each one of these fields for each document. All right. I think that's enough to make you dangerous. What we're going to do is go ahead and put 15 minutes on the clock. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Now, as you finish the lab, you're going to come to a set of knowledge check questions at the end of the lab. Let me go to the actual page. One moment here. So it should be on page 13. There's roughly 5 questions associated with the lab. You don't need to, you can just keep notes of it. You don't have to enter this information on the actual, in the CVLE. It's not a test or anything. We're just kind of making sure at the end we'll come back as a group and I'll talk about the knowledge checks and we'll go through them and make sure that we're all on the same page. Okay. All right. Once again, let's go ahead and put 15 minutes up on the clock. And if you have any questions, concerns, we'll assist you. Just type your need in the chat. All right, everyone, let's go ahead and take a look at this first lab. As I mentioned, we have a couple of knowledge checks associated with it as well. So we'll walk through this together. Odd. All right, one thing I did forget to mention, which is very important, is the scenario. So hopefully you read through the scenario, but I'll go ahead and cover that now as we walk through this lab. I kind of just wanted to highlight some of the first few steps, but we have a scenario, and in the scenario it says you've been asked to determine if the Adobe Flash Player vulnerability CVE-2012-2034 is in the KEV catalog, and if so, identify the affected endpoint or endpoints within the USSS organization. Once you determine what requires remediation, share your findings with your supervisor using permalinks. All right. So we've already gone through step 1 and 2. And even, I think we've completed 3. We've finished 4. I think we got all the way up to, I think, step 6. We're on step 6 now. All right. So in step 6, it says, talks about another function on where you can kind of query within the Discover tool, and actually in the dashboard as a tool throughout the whole platform. And so they want us to just type in Adobe Flash, and as you can see as I'm typing, anything within the data store in itself or within the documents that reference anything that I type, it becomes available. Now, obviously, these are probably artifacts of previous searches, but we're going to act like we don't see them. And so we're going to type Adobe Flash and then player, and then type return or hit return. And that return, what that does is it provides an update to what we're filtering on. All right. So instantly you can see that the numbers have now changed. Instead of just over 1,000, we have now 69 hits. And there's some highlighted areas within the document table. This is in regards to what we searched or what we're querying for, and what's referred to as the query bar. Right, so everybody see that? And so anytime that populates or is in any of the fields, it's going to be highlighted. And so that's just a quick way to identify if that information isn't in your data set. Now from here, we can then go based upon the date. So kev.date_added and search or sort. If you click the drop down within that column, you can sort old to new, new to old. You can actually move the column left to right or right to left. You can edit it if you want to. I ask that you don't edit the data field name or copy the columns. But anything other than that, you can kind of play around with. You can move it, like I said, or either sort differently. And I think in this lab, they want you to sort new to old. So we'll go ahead and do that. And so that puts the newest entry at the top. Now we can go back up to the query bar and then add a combine filter. Say and to include kev.cve.id. And we want to search for a specific one because they identified one in the scenario. In this case, I'm going to do quotes because we want an exact match. CVE-2012-2034, if I remember correctly. All right. Once we have that, we're going to go ahead and click that update again. And there it would have it. We can see that it is identified. It is in our inventory. Now, and as you go through today's labs, you can see, you can kind of pick up that there's multiple ways to be able to provide the results that you, or get to the results that you're looking for. You could have actually filtered from within the document table. That would have been another option. It's just kind of show you the query bar just because we were already using it in this case. Now that we've identified that it is in the KEV catalog, let's identify any host that might be affected by this vulnerability. So what we're going to do now, we're going to switch from the data view from KEV dictionary and go into the vuln current. Now there are some aliases in here, so hopefully everybody was able to find this. Yep, so that would be one of them. So let's go into this one. Oh, you know why? Nobody stopped me. Oh, that should be right. Let's see here. I think I may have to delete this first. Let's do this. We're going to follow the rules. All right. There we go.
Adrian, I think,
yeah,
you've got to delete your query first.
That was on the right path. I was second guessing myself because I see 0 coming up on the screen. And so hopefully that didn't catch. I don't know how many people that may have caused some issues with. Maybe we should modify those steps. But in a nutshell, we're moving from one data view to the other. And the reason there was an issue is because I had a filter from the from the KEV dictionary data view. And so it wasn't going to work within this data view. Kind of almost like that refresh thing that we talked about earlier. I think one of the fields that were associated with the KEV dictionary are not in the vuln current data view. All right, and so we're going to go back in and do much of the same thing we did in the previous one. We're going to say Adobe Flash Player, and you can do update here if you want. And we can see that still leaves us with over 20,000 hits. So let's see if we can refine those results. And we're going to do it and again. And in this case, we're going to type vulnerability finding.cve.id. Now, in saying this, obviously, I go through these labs and I know what some of the more commonly used fields are to filter off or can be utilized in this case. So this is something that we'll talk about later in some of the resources that are available, because some of you may say, hey, well, how did you know to use vulnerability_finding.cve.id? And that's a good question. And so we'll talk about some of in regards to the schema and the fields and attributes and provide you with a resource where you can find the list of that schema. And so you get more details on what each one of these fields are identifying. But for the sake of course and time, I know this is correct. CVE, we're going to do the same thing. 2012-2034, right? Now, the only thing that we've changed from within this data view, as you can probably guess, is the field vulnerability_finding.cve.id, and that's because we're in a vuln current data view, right? So things that are going to be in this data view are related to vulnerabilities. Once you have it, we're going to go ahead and click update. And we can add some fields. Once again, sometimes that makes it a lot easier to pinpoint information, and it gives it more structure within the document table. So I'm going to click the expanded view here, or minimize the expanded view, and we're going to add some fields. So you can see in this one, I think in the previous data view, excuse me, we had 8 available fields. You can see in this one, there's 172. With the populars, roughly about 10 that are listed in the popular section, right? So don't get that confused. These are just the more commonly used ones associated with this data view. So we're going to do vulnerability_finding.cve.id. And we lucked up. This is available to us in the popular section here. So I'm going to add that one. I'm going to add host.id, which is available as well. Organization.id, that one's available. And then host category. And as I mentioned earlier, if it wasn't here, there's a scroll that you can scroll through and see all the fields, right, that are available. You can go through all that until you find host.id. Or you could just type it in the search field name. So host. And as you can see here, anything with host, with anything that matches that syntax will be available. So we have one under available fields, which is not the one we don't want to add. And we have one that's listed here. All right, and so that was just an example. But for this last one, we're going to add host category. And so once again, I'm just going to type host.cat, find it, it's in the popular section, and add it. All right. Like I said, it might take some time to get used to that and get more familiar with the dashboard and some of the fields that are associated and trying to filter. Once you have it, I'm going to go ahead and go back into the expanded view of the document table. And next, we're going to identify certain types of host categories. And so for this exercise, we want to identify the endpoints. So I think I'm finished with filtering from within the query bar. Now we're going to add a filter from within the document table. The first thing I want to find is an endpoint. So that's a category or a host.category attribute. And so I'm just going to search through here until I find an endpoint. All right. And once you find it, you're just going to click the plus sign next to it. And it's going to populate that filter here at the top underneath the data view. And you'll see it also highlighted in the table. Next, we need to filter based upon the organization ID. Remember, we're looking for USSS. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to organization.id, look at the organization names, find the one that I want to identify or call out, and click the plus sign next to it. Boom. So now we've added 2 filters plus the filter that we have in our actual query bar. So I have a combined filter in the query bar and 2 individual filters in the add filter section. Now at this point, we've done all the work that we need to report and provide this information to our supervisor. From here, as long as they have the permissions and they have access, we could then go to share. And in this case, I think they want to do a permalink. You could do a snapshot or a saved object. So in this case, snapshot is available, so it saves it from this point. So to clarify, you can click the little question mark here and it provides you more details. But in essence, if you think of like VMs, right, you have a snapshot, a moment in time. So if there's any modification to this query or this filter, I would not get that in that permalink that's being shared to me, right, if I'm the supervisor. If I did the saved object, obviously I'd have to save the report first, but then at that point, any updates that are made, I would get those updates as well. So it just kind of depends on what you're trying to do to satisfy that need. This seems to be a quick, I need it right now. I don't care about next week, a reoccurring report. I just need it now. So a snapshot seems to suffice for what we're trying to do. At that point, you would just copy link, and you can then send it to them. Obviously, we're all in sandboxes, so I don't have one to send it to, but you can kind of get the feel for what would be next. And also, options gives you the option to provide a short URL as well. So pretty straight. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's any questions. Sorry. Does anybody have any questions in regards to this first lab? I know it's a lot. We're filtering everywhere. Just remember, this can be a tool for you. This is the query bar. And then these other two were provided in the add filter section. And then anytime you see yellow in your table, that means there's a filter being applied. All right. Like I said, if I wanted to, I could then save it, but that's not really part of this exercise, but you could just go to save and then give it a name. Cool. All right, let's talk about the knowledge checks now. So the first one, with your current filters in place, determine how many occurrences of CVE-2012-2034 are on CBP endpoints. All right. So we have a category of endpoint. We have our filter for the CVE ID, right? 2012-2034. The difference the difference maker here is going to be the organization ID. And so what I want to do to modify this, I no longer need to report on USSS. I'm just going to go ahead and go to my filter that I've created up here for organization.id, click on it, edit that filter. And so you can kind of see the breakdown. It says field is organization.id, has an operator. There's multiple operators depending on what you're looking for, whether it be is not, is one of. So if it's multiple options available, or just does not exist. So we want an exact match. The value we're going to change is CBP. So once you do that, update filter, and you can see there's one occurrence. Question number 2, how many mobile devices are affected by CVE-2012-2034 across all organizations? So once we're in, we're going to modify. I'm going to remove my organization.id filter, just delete it completely. So click the X. And I'm going to modify the endpoint or the host.category filter. Instead of the value being endpoint, I want mobile device. Update filter. And you can see that provides us with 21 devices. Moving on to number 3. How many mobile devices are affected by CVE-2012-2034 within system boundary 08? All right. So where do we see system boundary at? Fortunately, right now, we don't have a field for it. But, okay, so we have the right mobile devices. We have the CVE ID. We're going to go ahead and add a field. And that field is going to be system_boundary.id. Then we're going to do the same thing. So in this case, we're going to look for SB-08, which is system boundary 8, plus sign it. And we can see there's 2 occurrences of it. Now, the other option is I can also add these filter or add that within the query bar as well. I could then go in and then system_boundary.id, just like we did with the second one here. It would be the same type of information. Okay. All right. let's keep moving on. Question number 4. Click the host at the top of the host.id column. So that would be this one here. Determine the manager ID and whether the host is a high value asset. Ensure your time filter is set to last 1 year. All right, so what we're going to do is anytime you see blue within here, that lets you know it's a hyperlink. And so in this case, I'm going to click on the host-91. We're going to look at our dashboard indicator. Lets me know now I'm on the hardware asset details dashboard. The next thing I need to look at is the date or the time filter. We can see it's the last 30 days. They identified that we need to make sure it's the last 1 year. So I'm going to click the calendar, click on last 1 year. Information should, there we go. The metrics should be populated at that point. And so now it's just a matter of finding the information to report back. Right, you can see we got system detail, hardware asset details. Wait a minute. If we continue to look in this hardware asset details visualization panel, provides us some information regarding host name, current status. This is what we want. It has a manager ID. So we have that. Let's see if it provides us anything else. If I scroll back up, I missed it earlier. It also lets us know that it is not a high value asset, which was another part of that question. So it's false. All right, last question, number 5. From the hardware asset details page, determine how many instances of Android software are present on the host identified in question 4. All right, so we're currently looking at that host, which is host-91. We're going to scroll down. And if you happen to see something like this, no results found, that we don't use all the information that's available, the dashboards that are available, or in this case, visualizations. So for our training purposes, so we may not have populated that data in case you see that. All right, so it tells us we need to go to the detected software panel. And from there, we're going to create a filter for Android in the software finding software name column. I think it's this one. Nope. There we go. As you can see, with some of these ones with long names, trying to view the full column, you can see you can expand it for those who didn't know. All right, and so you can quickly try to search and see if you see anything related to Android. In this case, it's easy because it's listed on the 3rd line here. And so I can filter, and I'm going to click the plus sign next to that name. And that lets me know that the filter's been applied because the yellow is, the name is highlighted in yellow. And we can see that there's 32 documents or instances of that software present. All right, now if we go back up to the top, the other option was if we didn't click it within the actual table, you could go in and create a filter. It tells you what data view it's located in, the actual field name, the operator. Obviously, this is another exact match, and then you just type in the value. But that's it. That concludes that first lab. Hopefully everybody was able to work through it, but if not, let us know. We can try to assist you. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and pass things over to John to talk about the next lab.
All right, thanks, Adrian, and thanks for that great overview of the dashboard and the Discover tool. So at this point, everybody should be a dashboard pro, right? So let's take a look now at lab number 2. And what you're going to be doing in this lab is identifying some KEV vulnerabilities as well as identifying KEVs within an organization or a system boundary. This lab there's a scenario at the beginning, so I'll go ahead and read that to you. So it says you've been asked to determine if there are any critical KEVs that have not been remediated on system boundary 11. In order to do this, you'll need to use the CDM Agency Dashboard to filter for information within your sub-agency, which is contractor. Okay. Identify the KEVs and create a report that can be shared with management. Okay, so with that, I'm trying to think if there's anything I need to let you know here. It's a pretty straightforward lab. You're just going to set some filters and then answer your knowledge check questions. You'll also be creating a report. So let's go ahead. We'll put 15 minutes on the clock, and I'll check in with you at about the 5-minute mark and see if there's anybody that needs to extend. But I think 15 minutes should do it. And with that, we'll put the timer up, and we'll see you back at about 5 till 11. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a chance to finish the lab and refill your coffee. So let's take a look at lab number 2. So I'll go ahead and share out my screen here. All right. Okay. So hopefully you are seeing the dashboard. Now what I did, I worked ahead a couple of steps just to kind of save you the pain of watching me select attributes. So it's kind of like one of those cooking shows, you know, where they roast a whole turkey inside of a 5-minute break. So kind of like that. So hopefully we saved a minute or two, I don't know. All right, so just like we did for the first lab, it directs us to the Discover tool, which is where we're at. Okay, I cleared out any existing filters and attributes, so that's what you do when you click New. That takes care of that. Always recommend that you, anytime you're starting something new, that you do that. That way, there's nothing left behind to create confusion. All right, next we selected the CDM Vuln Current data view, which we have right here. Okay, and then it asks us to create or select some attribute fields. Okay, now interestingly, this particular data view has 185, yes, 185 attributes. So as Adrian was talking about earlier, you can scroll down and look at every one of them, and they're all in alphabetical order. But I really don't think you want to do that. Okay, and so as you add these attributes, it pops them up here in this list at the top so that you can see easily what you have. Okay, that way, and also as he mentioned, you know, these columns can be kind of scrunched up, but if you hover over the heading, you'll notice that you get a little pop-up that gives you the actual name of the column. So for this one, it's vulnerability finding CVEID, which is kind of lengthy, but and you can, of course, you can move them around as well. Kind of like an Excel sheet, if you will. So, all right. So I've got the attributes here listed in number 4. I've got them here across the document table. So let me go ahead. I'm going to expand this out, or actually I'll collapse the left-hand side here so we can see this a little bit better. All right. So the first thing it wants us to do then, after we get these situated is it wants us to create a filter for vulnerability finding CVE FVA status equals true. Okay. All right. So that was the first attribute that we selected out of that list. And if I go down here and hover over this first one, you'll see that that's vulnerability finding CVE FVA status. Okay. So a couple of ways we can do it. We can create a filter. Okay. And we can say, you know, vulnerability finding CVE FVA status is true. Okay. Or we can just find true in the list here, and we'll use our shortcut and click the plus sign. Okay. And notice how it decreased our number of hits. Okay. Now the next thing it wants us to do is to create another filter for vulnerability finding remediated equals false. Okay, so that's the second attribute that we selected. So I'm just going to go right here and I'm going to click the shortcut, the plus sign. And now we have two filters, FVA status equals true and vulnerability finding remediated equals false. Now, in order to have a KEV, you have to have these two things, okay? So every KEV has an FVA status, and we don't really get into the federal vulnerability action status in this class, but if you want to attend our vulnerability management class, we do get into that and talk about that a little bit. So every KEV has an FVA status, which elevates it in the big scheme of things. Okay. All right. So the next thing we need to do now is we need to continue creating some filters, and the next one is for organization ID, which is contractor. Okay, if you remember, our scenario, we're a contractor, so I'm going to scroll down here and see if I can do my shortcut, and it doesn't look like I can. Not easily. That's the thing. That's why I call it a shortcut, because you know, it works great in our training database because we don't have a lot of data in here. But at your agency, where you may have tens of thousands of rows, you don't want to be scrolling through just, you know, trying to find the value that you're looking for. Sometimes it's just easier to come up here and do an add filter. Okay, and we're going to say organization ID, and if I just type org, I can see that we have organization ID right here in the list. Okay, and we're going to say is contractor and add the filter. And notice it adjusted our number of hits, and now we're filtering for contractor, as you can see from the yellow. The next one is we need to filter for system boundary ID, system boundary 11. Okay, so we have 11 here, so I'll use my shortcut because it's easy. Okay, so we add system boundary 11. And then finally, we need to add a third filter, or the last filter, which is vulnerability finding CVE severity of critical. Okay, and that is right here. So again, if I just hover over the heading of the column, it will pop up the name. Okay, so we have critical right here. So I'll just go ahead and click the plus sign. Okay. Now, I think we have all of our filters set. And at this point, it wants us to save the search. So what I'm going to do, I'll go ahead and save this off. What you want to do is give it a meaningful name. Okay, for you know, whatever you're trying to do. So give it a meaningful name. And I should have told you to put your initials at the end so that you didn't step on other folks. But let's do KEV findings. No, but KCS. There we go. Okay, and we'll save it off. Now notice what happens. It sort of does this refresh, and if I go up here to the to our breadcrumb, you'll see that I'm now looking at the report and not necessarily the visualization. Okay, so just be aware of that. It doesn't really affect anything, but you know, it's just a good idea to know that. Okay, so the next thing we want to do now is we want to create a report to share with management. And so we're going to do that. We're going to say share CSV reports and then generate CSV. And I think tested this yesterday, so it should work. You get a little pop-up that says queued report for search. Okay, and then we say download report. Now, I think because I have my screen shared out a certain way, I can't show you the Excel sheet, but if you look at step 11, that's basically what it would look like. You'd have 277 rows on your Excel sheet, and you'd be able to manipulate the data using Excel functions. And that's a great way to share information if you have folks that don't have access to the dashboard or have different access than you, so they might not be able to see, you know, everything that you see. Okay, but great way to share information, particularly with management. You can attach it to an email or, you know, however you want to share it. Okay, that brings us to the knowledge checks. Okay, so knowledge check number 1 says to close the Excel report and return to the Discover tool. Okay, so we didn't open the Excel report, so we're already in the Discover tool. It says with the existing filters in place, modify your report and determine the greatest number of days these critical vulnerabilities have been active in the contractor organization in system boundary 11. Okay, so we have critical vulnerabilities. We're already filtering for critical vulnerabilities, so we know what those are. Okay. We're also filtering for the contractor organization, and we're also filtering for system boundary 11, so we know what those are. So really the only thing that we have to do is figure out the greatest number of days, right? So if we go to the vulnerability finding days active, and if I hover over this, you'll see that it's this column, okay? And we're going to sort from high to low. Okay, and that will give us the answer that we're looking for. So in this case, it looks like we have 149, or you know, 3 or 4 that are 149, and then it begins to whittle down a little bit. So, so that is how you reach the answer to number 1. All right, number 2, modify your filters and determine how many remediated vulnerabilities across all severity levels were last found in the contractor organization in system boundary 11 between November 25th, 2023 and November 28th, 2023. All right, and it gives us a little hint there. It says filter using the vulnerability finding last found date. Okay, so we have a couple of filters to adjust here. So it wants to know remediated vulnerabilities. So let's come up here. Remember, we have remediated set to false, so we're going to modify that, and I'll just give it a click, and we're going to say edit filter. Vulnerability finding remediated is true. Okay. All right, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to disable all, we're going to disable the severity level of critical, because we want all severity levels, right? So I can either delete it by clicking the X, or I can temporarily disable it, which is what I'm going to do. Okay, and that's the same, it has the same effect as deleting it, but it's there for later if you want to use it for later. Okay, and I'm a little bit lazy, so I kind of like doing it that way, so I don't have to go back up and create an extra filter again. So the next thing we need to do is we need to create a filter for vulnerability finding last found date, and that should be our last thing to do here. So I'm going to create a filter. And when you're creating a filter for a date, there's no way to really do the shortcut. You have to come up and do a filter and you know, put in your values that you need, because otherwise it just gets to be you know, a little bit confusing if you try to do a shortcut. Okay, so what we're looking for here is vulnerability finding last found date. So I'm just going to type in last, see what we get. And there it is, vulnerability finding last found date. And this time we're going to say is between, because we're looking for a date range. Okay, and the start of the range is November 25th. And you just type it in like that, or you can type it in year first and month and then the day, however you prefer. Okay. And then it's 11/28/2023. And we're going to say add filter. Okay. And that gives us everything. If you notice here in the vulnerability finding last found date, we have all of our dates are November 27th. So it falls between the 25th and the 28th. Okay. In this case, all of our data is dated the 27th, but if you had items that were dated the 25th or the 28th, you would get those as well. Okay, so that's all you have to do to get the answer for number 2. All right, number 3, it says modify your filters and determine how many vulnerabilities across all severity levels have been remediated in the CBP organization for system boundary 16. This one had a little twist. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this date filter, because we don't want to narrow it down to 3 days. We want more than that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just delete that out. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to edit the organization ID, because we're looking for CBP now instead of contractor. So I'm going to edit the filter, and we're going to say organization ID is CBP. Okay. So no results as of yet, but we still need to change our system boundary. Okay, so let's go here. We're going to edit filter. System boundary is, notice when I click, I get this drop down. Okay, and this is true of a lot of fields in the dashboard, and it only goes to 10. Okay, so all we have to do, I'm just going to backspace, and we're going to type in 16. And you see it pops up here, update the filter. Okay, and that's all we needed to do for number 3. Okay. Now I might, I just want to add that we don't really highlight a right answer. For example, 248 hits. Okay. I don't want you to remember 248. I want you to remember the steps that got you there. Because in your dashboard at your agency, you know, you could run this query today and get 248, and you could run it tomorrow and get 548. Okay, so it's really not about the end result. It's about doing the process correctly. Okay, so so just keep that in mind as you go through the labs. Okay. All right, number 4, start with your current filter set and determine how many vulnerabilities were designated with a secured or severity level of high or critical for the CBP organization on system boundary 16. Okay, so we have CBP filtered, we have system boundary 16 filtered. Okay, so the only thing we need to do now is we need to modify the severity level, okay, which is right here. Remember, we just temporarily disabled it. So right now we're going to re-enable it. And then we're going to edit it because we're looking for high or critical. Right now it's only filtered for critical. So we're going to edit the filter. We're going to say is one of high and critical. Okay. And now you see that we have both. Okay. All right. Let me go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see if there's any questions. Okay. All right. Is there a naming convention to the similar views? Looks like Adrian got your question there, Michael, so that's good. Doesn't look like there's any other questions. So with that, let's go ahead and kick off lab number 3. In this lab, let me pull it up here a second. We have another scenario, and in this lab, you're going to become familiar with filtering fields and values in a document table, as well as review the vulnerability details dashboard for specific information. Okay. So this lab deals with Apache Log4j KEV. So the scenario is your supervisor at the DHS organization is requesting that you identify any occurrences of the Apache Log4j vulnerability within system boundary 2. They would also like to know if the vulnerability has been remediated and if there are any high value assets that might be affected. So identify the number of assets, if any, that may be affected by the Apache Log4j vulnerability. All right. So this lab is a little bit longer than the last one. So I think what we'll do, we'll put 20 minutes on the timer, and that should give you enough time to get through this one. And once again, I'll check at about the 5-minute mark to see how y'all are doing. Let's put 20 minutes on the timer, and we'll see you back at about 10 minutes to 12. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Let's take a look at lab number 3. So let me get my screen shared out here. Okay. You should be seeing the Discover tool. I went ahead and worked up to step number 3. So I've entered the Discover tool. I've cleared out all of my prior queries and attributes, and I've selected the CDM CPE dictionary, okay, which is step number 3. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a little report to look at and see what version numbers of Apache Log4j we have. So let me go ahead and put these in here. Version, title. Okay. So step number 4, we add our attributes. Okay. And then in the query bar, we have to type in a little query here to get it to narrow things down. Okay. So this is just one way to do it. Okay. But we're going to type in CPE vendor equals Apache and CPE product equals Log4j. and CPE version equals 1 dot star. Okay. And as you can see here, and I think Adrian showed you this as well, if you've been doing work like I was testing the lab earlier, so it remembers what I've typed. But I want you to be sure and type it correctly. So hopefully you didn't select it out of the list if you'd worked it already. Okay, so this is going to tell us if we have Apache, Log4j, anything with version 1 dot and above. Okay, so that's our wild card. So I'm going to go ahead and update that. And sure enough, we have some items here with 1.2, 1.0, 1.1. Okay, so that just lets us know what versions of Apache Log4j are out there, okay, based on our query. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to do a little filtering otherwise. So step number 8 wants us to click New, so we're going to clear everything out. And we're going to select, what is our vuln current is our, so CDM vuln current. Bring that up. Okay, now we're ready. So number 9, step number 9, we're basically going to do the same thing. We're going to select our fields that we want to see. So vulnerability finding, CVE, FVA status, remediated, I think is the next one. Organization ID, high value asset. Let's see if we have that one in our list here. We do not. So I'm just going to type in value. And we have host high value asset. Okay. System boundary ID. Vulnerability finding CVE severity. Host ID. And vulnerability finding CVE ID. Okay. Yeah, I think I got them all. Okay. And then step number 10, since we have them all in here now, and I'll go ahead and collapse this so we can have a little more real estate. There we go. Okay, so we have them all in, and step number 10 just wants you to, to make sure that you didn't forget them, because there are a number of them in step 9. So it just wants you to double check and make sure that they're all there. Okay, so now in step 11, we're going to start creating some filters. Okay, and the first one is vulnerability finding CVE FVA status equals true. So I'm going to use our shortcut wherever I can. Okay, so we're going to say true for the first column, CVE FVA status. We're going to say false for remediated, which is this column. We'll click that. And you see as I click these, it puts the filters up here in the upper left, so you can see what you've got in place already. Okay, organization ID is DHS. So I don't think I can do a shortcut for this, but I'm going to show you a little trick. I'm going to click CISA. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit it. And I'm going to say organization ID is DHS. Okay, it's just another little trick. Okay. Otherwise, you can come up here to the add filter button and add a filter very easily. That's standard procedure. So, but this is just another little shortcut for you. Okay, the next one is high value asset equals true. So that's right here. So we'll click this shortcut. Okay, system boundary ID is system boundary 2. Okay, we'll click that. And vulnerability finding CVE severity is critical. So that's this column right here. And we'll click the shortcut. All right. So we have our filters set now based on step 11. Step 12 wants us to type log4j in the query bar. Okay, so we'll come up here, we'll type log4j. We'll do a needs updating, or we'll click the update button. And you'll see that we narrowed our hits down quite a bit. We're at 20 hits now. Okay. Now, step 13, on the right of the screen, just click the blue link under the Vulnerability Finding CVE ID column. Okay, so that's our last column over here, Vulnerability Finding CVE ID, and we're going to click this link. Now, I think Adrian mentioned this in the first lab. Whenever you have something in blue font, that is a link to another area of the dashboard. So we're going to click this, and that's going to take us to the Vulnerability Details dashboard. Okay. And we're going to set our date to last 1 year. And now we should be able to see some information regarding CVE 2021-44228. Okay. Similar to the hardware asset details, in that there's just a lot of good information here on this particular vulnerability. So you can see the description, the published date, the criticality. There's some FireEye reports. Not every vulnerability will have FireEye report, but this one has some. Okay, and then you see the detected vulnerabilities and the hosts that they're associated with, and some dates and some other information here that can be useful to you. Okay, so a lot of good information in the vulnerability details dashboard. All right, that brings us to our knowledge checks. So it says here, using the vulnerability details dashboard, determine the base score for CVE 2021-44228. Okay, let's go up here to the top. I kind of gave it away a minute ago, I think. But under CVE information, if we look right here, we can see that the CVSS base score is 10. Okay. So just, again, just some of the information that you can find in this dashboard. All right, using the vulnerability details dashboard, determine the number of times CVE 2021-44228 occurs within system boundary 5. Okay, so let's go down here and we'll see what we can find out. Detected vulnerabilities. Okay, and it wants to know about system boundary 5. So again, I can create a filter up at the top, or I can use my shortcut. Since we have a system boundary 5 right here, I can just do my shortcut. Okay, and we'll click that, and that's all we have to do. Okay, that's all we have to do. So we have the vulnerability and system boundary 5, and that lets us know that we have 59 documents or 59 occurrences in system boundary 5. Okay. All right, number 3. So return to the Discover tool, add a filter, and determine how many hosts at DHS in system boundary 2 are not remediated, critical, and virtual. Okay, let's get back to the Discover tool. So what we'll do is I'll just click the back button. That'll take us back. We have to click it a couple of times because we did some changes there on the vulnerability details dashboard, but that brings us back to our Discover tool. You can see right here in the upper left, lets you know where you are. All right. add a filter and determine how many hosts at DHS in system boundary 2 are not remediated, critical, and virtual. Okay, let's see what we have here. We have, we're filtered on DHS already. We're filtered on system boundary 2 already, so we have that in place. Not remediated, which is remediated equals false, so we have that in place. Critical, we have that in place, and then the only thing we're missing is virtual, right? So a couple of things we can do. We can create a filter, and we can say host is virtual, is true. Okay. And you see our filter right here. The other thing we could do is we could come over here, we could add the attribute to our, I don't think it's listed here, we'd have to look it up, but that would be easy. And we could just add it to our report, basically. So that's all you have to do, create a filter or add an attribute, okay, and filter it that way. All right, add an attribute field to your report and identify which facility has the most virtual machines. Okay, let's go over here. And we're going to add facility ID. That's going to identify the facility that has the greatest number of machines. Now, what you can do, since there's only 15 items listed here, you can sort these A to Z and just do a count. But if you had, 15,000 items, what you'd have to do is create a filter one at a time for each of those facilities and figure out the count. Okay. Again, not hard to do, but just it's just one way to do it. Okay. All right. Lastly, expand the line item for host 1044 by clicking the double arrow icon on the far left of the row. Review the information and then determine the vulnerability finding last found date for CVE 2021-44228. Okay, so it wants us to click 1044, which is right here. It's the third one down. Let me go ahead and collapse this real quick. Third one down. And we're going to click this double arrow right over here on the far left. And that's going to open up this panel. Okay. And what we need to do now is we need to find the vulnerability finding last found date. Okay, and remember, they're all in alphabetical order. So if I scroll down, you'll see that I have a couple of things here. I have rows per page, which is 100, and I think that's the most you can do, is 100. So that way I would have to click on page number 2. I think the default rows per page is 25. So you may have as many as 10 or so items listed on here, 10 or so pages. Okay. And then right here we have vulnerability finding last found date of November 29. Okay. Now, the other thing you can do, let me go back up here to the top, is you can search for the field names just like you've done in the past. You can search, and I'm going to say, what is it, last found? And you notice it pops up all the ones with last. So that's a real easy way to do it too. Okay. So vulnerability finding last found date. It's November 29th. Okay. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. We'll get back to our slide deck here. And I think what what that does. Any questions here? Let me check and see if there's any questions. No questions? Okay. Thank you, Verona, for posting that. CBLE will be available. Take advantage of that, folks, particularly if you're not that familiar with the dashboard. Jump in there. You will log in the same way you did today, and just bring up the dashboard and click around and do your labs or whatever you're comfortable with. Okay. All right, we have a little bit left to cover before we close out today. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Adrian, and he's going to go over some responding and reporting functions. So Adrian, over to you.
Thank you, John. But before I do have a poll. I mentioned that we would have some polling questions during today's session. So let me bring that up and you can take a look at it as we're going through this. One moment. And so you may have to open up your poll if you click the ellipsis there. But just in regards to today's session, so in regards to CETH. But while you're taking a look at that polling question, we're going to talk about incident response and reporting. And so what happens if there is an incident that is found by CETH or someone else? And so the next section will address some of the incident response and vulnerability response procedures. Now, today's labs, we focused on vulnerabilities, and more particular, I think on the lab that I performed or I walked you through, we were looking at KEVs, some of the more known exploited vulnerabilities that have kind of gone to the forefront, need to be identified and hopefully removed from your network. But what do you do when there's a confirmed malicious cyber event at your agency? How do you handle it? And so these are questions that you may have to answer and address. And so what you see on your on the slide now is the incident response process, and there's actually an incident and vulnerability response playbook available. There's a copy in the supplemental document section in the CVLE, so you can download that and take a look at it. But it provides a standardized response process for cybersecurity incidents. It describes the process and completion through the incident response phases as defined in the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or what we were known as NIST, in Special Publication 800-61 Rev 2.5. Now, these phases include preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication and recovery, and any post-incident activities, right? Because as we know, there's a lot of action going on, but at the end, we need to come back together and identify maybe some lessons learned or maybe even having a hot wash. And so that's what that's covered. And this playbook describes the process federal, civilian, executive branch agencies should follow for a confirmed malicious cyber event. The flow chart that you see on the slide is organized by phases of the incident response lifecycle. So in the NIST key there, they kind of show you where you should be in these phases. It's color coded and provides you a path. And so it describes each step in more detail as well. Many activities, obviously the iterative, and may occur and evolve until the incident is closed out. So it's definitely a helpful aid in the event that you need to go down that path. Now on this slide, we've kind of put together a list of best practices to eradicate and recover from a cyber incident. These will vary based upon the situation at hand, obviously. And so the objective of the eradication and recovery phase is to allow the return to normal operations. One of the first steps is to eliminate artifacts of the incident, like malicious code and mitigating vulnerabilities or other conditions that were exploited. You want to take actions to eliminate all evidence of compromise and prevent the threat actor from maintaining a presence in the environment. You want to ensure that preservation of evidence is necessary. And this is an important step, particularly if there may be a pending criminal investigation. It's possible that eradication and recovery actions can be executed simultaneously as well, kind of that process that I mentioned earlier. And so often this is also one of those iterative processes, and may also require immediate hardening or modification of systems. So as you realize, hey, we have a vulnerability or weakness in the network, we need to rectify that and kind of move forward so that they're not still in the network. Eradication plans should be well formulated and coordinated before being executed in in the incident response plan. And if the adversary exploited a specific vulnerability, then use the vulnerability response playbook to address vulnerability during eradication activities. Now I'm going to pass things back over to John to tell us more about the vulnerability response process.
All right, thank you, Adrian. So let me get us where we need to be here. There we go. All right. So what you see here on the slide is the vulnerability response process, and it employs standard vulnerability management programs that include phases for identifying, analyzing, remediating, and reporting on vulnerabilities. And this illustration describes the vulnerability response process in terms of a standard vulnerability management program. Okay. Now, proactively, it identifies reports of vulnerabilities that are actively exploited in the wild by monitoring threat feeds and information sources. Is one of the primary activities of the CETH threat hunters and the CETH functionality. Now, the CISA cybersecurity alerts and advisory site provides vulnerability summaries, and NIST's National Vulnerability Database, or NVD, shows vulnerabilities that are being exploited in the wild. So I've got a couple of links here that I can pop in the chat for you. This one is for cybersecurity alerts. And the next one is for the NVD. And you can Google these, it's pretty easy, particularly the NIST one, and it'll come right up. But there's the links. You can take a look at those when you get a chance. All right. So remediation best practices. Now what you see here on the slide is a list that's based on best practices. So some of these bullets may fall within the recommended checks and reviews that you already have in place. Your agency may have specific requirements or issues that it wants emphasized in addition to routine activities. There may be specific vulnerabilities that require waivers or special circumstances, or maybe they'll need to be reported on more frequently, something like that. You'll want to remediate actively exploited vulnerabilities in a timely manner. That kind of goes without saying. You don't want the bad guys in your system any longer than necessary, right? Or you don't want to give them an in. Okay. Now, in most cases, the first step in remediation should consist of patching. Okay. In other cases, limiting access, isolating systems, isolating applications or services, or making a permanent configuration change might be the best course of action. But each system should be able to be described in one of three categories, and that is remediated, which means the system is no longer vulnerable; mitigated, which means that other compensating controls are in place; or susceptible or compromised, which means that no action's been taken. Okay. But in any event, you're going to want to ensure that endpoints are configured properly. You're going to want to establish a battle rhythm and use the dashboard to identify the worst problems first and then respond accordingly. All right, reporting requirements. Finally, one of the most important tasks is to report findings when they arise. Executive Order 14028, M2201, BOD 2201, all of these mandate stronger cybersecurity in one way or another. and as well as improved remediation standards. Okay. And each directive has its own response and reporting requirements. So with regard to emergency directives, or EDs, and binding operational directives, BODs, which typically have a time-sensitive response, the dashboard can supply information on assets, vulnerabilities, and user statuses that may be required for reporting purposes. Now, CISA will likely have its own incident reporting requirements. Agencies also need to strengthen their incident response procedures through the use of playbooks, which we talked about just a few minutes ago. And I think Adrian mentioned that there is a copy of the playbook in the supplemental docs in the CBLE, so please take that with you. Okay. Take a look at the notification guidelines on the CISA site when you get a chance, and I'll go ahead and put this link in the chat so you have it. Give me 1 second there. Okay. All right. So that's the Federal Incident Notification Guidelines. Interesting site, so give that a look when you get a chance. Okay. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Adrian to cover a bit about agency reporting.
The goal of post-incident activities phase is to document the incident. Report to agency leadership. You want to harden the environment to prevent similar incidents and apply lessons learned to improve the handling of future incidents. Agencies must report to CISA in accordance with federal incident notification guidelines, which was John just mentioned. He provided that in the chat. And along with that, binding operational directives and emergency directives should be reported on as indicated by the directive or by CISA as well. And so what about reporting at the agency level? How's that covered? And so first and foremost, you want to identify and follow your agency's processes. Once you're aware of agency requirements, you can then provide information and reporting that meets those requirements. Who will you report to at your agency? You want to make sure you include a detailed account of the situation and provide solutions that you think would be most effective. You want to include a timeline for remediation and communicate the associated risk. There are many resources available to you, to be sure to take advantage of them. One thing to note is you're not alone in this fight. And so, a lot of effort goes into data collection and analysis, but what you do with it afterwards is what's important, right? You can collect all day, but if you're just collecting and not acting upon it, really becomes meaningless. And so data analysis and reporting should result in some sort of actionable task or recommendation. Well, everyone, we now reached the conclusion of today's course, and we're going to talk about some of the resources and some of the highlights for today. First, we're going to talk about what the road ahead looks like for the CETH capability. This roadmap illustrates the progression of CETH throughout the federal enterprise. Even though a lot has been accomplished, there's still a lot to come in terms of moving the needle to get us to a threat-based response posture. The most notable thing is that the CETH capability will continue to evolve with additional and improved capabilities as new versions of the dashboard are released. Now, in regards to risk management, some of the intended outcomes of CETH, the CDM Agency Dashboard, and the CDM in general are good cyber hygiene and being able to move from a compliance-based approach to a proactive threat-based approach. Also, it improves the agency's situation awareness and performance management. The CDM dashboard and CETH can provide information to make informed risk-based decisions at the agency and the federal level. And we've talked about a lot of that during today's course. How that information and data is being utilized not only possibly at your agency, but agencies throughout the federal government. Now, to just recap some of the things that we talked about today and mentioned, we provided you an overview of what CETH is and how it can be utilized. During today's event, we talked about we discussed some of the federal laws and guidance that are available in regards to CETH. We talked about the continuous monitoring, threat hunting, and incident response using the CDM dashboard. We realized that it's a continuous process, right? Just because we remove it today doesn't mean something won't be on the forefront tomorrow. So, we talk about things like Log4j and vulnerabilities with CVEs that are being released and being updated continuously. And so now with the visualizations and the saved searches, hopefully that provides you some familiarity with the dashboard, how to navigate. Some of the quick cheat sheets are features associated with the dashboard to kind of help you out and make it more efficient when you're trying to filter and query. But at the end of the day, it's your system and your data. So you want to make sure that you, as a whole, you want to make sure it's secure. And so the dashboard provides you one method to being able to identify what's on your network and to being able to remediate any weaknesses or vulnerabilities that are identified. All right. So that's just a recap. What I'm going to do is pass it back over to John and talk about some of those training resources that are available to you after today's course.
All right, thank you, Adrian. So let's take a quick look here before we head out at some of the different stuff that's available to you with regard to CDM and training. So one of the things that we always like to show folks are our upcoming courses. So you see here on the left of this slide the courses that are going to be presented here, I think, through the middle of May. If you're interested in those, definitely sign up. I'll show you where you're gonna do that here in just a second. As Joe mentioned when we started out this morning, we have a number of different microlearn videos for you on FedVTE that you can take a look at, and I'll show you where you can find those as well here in just a second. So let me go ahead and show you this slide. Now, click that smiley face and give me a thumbs up if you feel a little better about the dashboard than you did a few hours ago. I like the smiley face. Okay. There we go. Clapping hands. No party horns yet. Oh, there's one. Okay. Perfect. All right. As you can tell, the instructors love the emojis. It's so much better than raise your hand. So anyway, well, excellent. Thanks for the feedback. I feel like we've kind of accomplished something if you're a little more comfortable. So that's a good thing. And as I always tell folks, continue to get familiar with the dashboard. As with anything else, the more time and the more practice you put into it, the more familiar and the more comfortable you're going to be using it. I know maybe it seemed a little daunting today with all those attribute names that were very long and all that, but I promise, you use them a few times and they become second nature. Okay. We also offer a variety of training courses. I'll show you where that list is here in just a second, but we have a 2-day course coming up in the end of May in Arlington, Virginia. So if you're interested in an in-person course where you can see your classmates and exchange ideas and information, we would love to see you there. And I think Veranda will probably post a link in the chat for that. I believe that's open for registration now. And also for our trainings that are coming up, let me post a link here for you. This is there's the link for the May 21st course. So this link is the Gov delivery link. If you want, you can sign up to get reminders for our courses. That way you'll always know what's coming up next. So just visit that site. I think it's really easy. You just put in some basic information, I think your name and your email, and then it will ask you what you want to be reminded of, and you just need to click what is it called? CDM Agency Dashboard Training Program. Okay. So take a look at that when you get a chance. All right, and as I mentioned, the cyber range is going to be available to you through the close of business tomorrow, so 4 p.m. Eastern time. So jump in, take advantage of that. Click around. You can't break anything. Again, take advantage of that so that you get more familiar with the dashboard. All right. Quick question here. Who has a Fed VTE account? Give me a thumbs up. How many of you have a Fed VTE account? Wow, quite a few of you. Okay. Excellent. All right. So what I want to do now is take you into, rather than belabor this slide here, I'm going to just do a quick demo of these two sites so you know where to find things. It's not all that difficult, but it's nice to know how to navigate it. And these links are live on this slide, so be sure and take the slides with you. That way, all you have to do is click and it will take you where you need to go. Okay, so let me go ahead and share out my screen here. We get to the right place, bear with me. There we go. Okay. So hopefully you're seeing the continuous diagnostics and mitigation training. This is the CISA training, CDM training site. Gives you a little blurb there at the top about who we are and what we do. Dashboard Cyber Range Training. This is a list here of all of our courses that we deliver. And if you want to know what they're about, for example, CDM 210, I just click the plus sign and it gives us a little paragraph on what the course is about, so you can kind of tell what you might be interested in attending. Okay. Upcoming training events. This is where you'll come to register for training events that are currently open and available. So we have right here today, Introduction to CETH. Okay, on April 30th, we have System Security Analyst, and then into May, we have the additional courses, and this CDM 111 is the in-person course. I would recommend, if you're interested in attending that, register early because space is limited. The training room is fairly small, unfortunately, but there's enough room for about 20 people, so we'll have the registration open for that until much closer to the date. So make a note, okay, and please join us. All right, virtual learning training environment. An aware adaptive risk enumeration. There's a couple of aware videos on here. They're pretty good. If you're interested in the aware scoring algorithm, you can watch those. But virtual learning training environment, there we go, is Fed VTE. So let me go ahead and click that. And for those of you that don't have an account, this is the landing page for Fed VTE. And all you have to do, I think, is just click down here and register here and give them some basic information, and they will set up an account for you. Now, you do have to have a .gov email, and if your contract support, you can use your corporate email if you'd like. You just have to have a federal employee to vouch for you, that's all. Okay, so, all right, let me take a look here at FedVTE. And hopefully I typed my password right. There we go. All right, landing page for FedVTE. Lots of good stuff here. Always take a look at the full catalog because that's always changing. There's a lot of good things in there that you can get involved with. Some new courses listed here as well. But what I want to point out to you first and foremost is the CDM courses right up here in the center. Okay, and we'll start with the Dashboard Elastic courses. And that brings us to this page. And these are recordings of the courses that we deliver. Okay, so they run about 2 to 2.5 hours each, and you can, start and stop as you need to. But the downside to this is there's no hands-on labs. There's lab demonstrations, but you don't get to do a hands-on lab exercise. So that's only for the live courses. But these are great. Great place to start. If you don't have time to do a course, you can come here and do a truncated version. So take a look at these and see what might be of interest. And if you're interested in them, you can sign up for the virtual course and get the labs, hands-on labs. Okay. Next is the CDM MicroLearn courses. Whole bunch of stuff here listed for different CDM topics. So I would just say I would recommend that you come and take a look at this, see what's of interest. I think the longest video here is about 40 minutes. They average about 15 minutes, maybe 20, if that. And there's a lot of new videos here that have been posted recently, so you want to take a look at those. I do want to show you one thing. Let me find it here. I think it's this one. Just so you're aware. You'll notice here it gives me some information about the video, but what happens when I click it is it brings up this page. Okay, and I can watch the full video right here at the top, or I can watch different parts of the video. What this is it's an interview that we've broken into 5 parts. So you can view just the part that's of interest, or you can view the whole video. So I just wanted to show you that there's a few videos that pop up like this. So I didn't want you to think there was an error or something, but you just click the link and that will take you into the full video. Okay, I think that does it for FedVTE. So let me get us back to our slide deck here. There's one other thing I want to share with you, and let me copy this before we get there. Okay. And that is the CDM Dashboard knowledge base. And if you notice there at the bottom, there's an email to request access. And I'm going to pop that email into the chat as well. Okay. That way, if you don't have the slides or something, you can take it from the chat. But this is a great resource. There's just all kinds of information on this site. Release notes, install files, all that stuff is available for download. User guides, there's also training modules, there's also just different documentation regarding the different versions that are out there. So lots of good stuff. So what you want to do is just make a request to the email that you see there on the screen and provide your name and your agency. And I think it requires your IP address because they have to list you to access it, and then just a brief justification of why you need access. But if you're involved at all with the dashboard, it shouldn't be a problem. But if you if you run into problems or you need help or anything, just contact your CDM POC at your agency, and they should be able to help you with the request process. All right. Last but not least, points of contact. Cyber Insights at CISA.dhs.gov is all things training. So if you have any questions about registration or dates or anything about the training that you've attended today, just send them an email and they will be able to help you out. Okay. CDM training team lead is Joseph Bukovac at CISA.dhs.gov. Joe is our CDM training team lead for the dashboard, and he is always interested in your feedback. So feel free to contact him directly if you have questions or suggestions. All right, CDM program office questions. This is for the larger CDM program questions, not necessarily training stuff. They'll just forward the training stuff to us anyway. But, larger questions for CDM program, you can contact them directly at this email here. Okay, and then lastly, the knowledge-based support is just a copy of the email that you saw on the previous slide. Okay, so that way you have it in a couple of places. All right. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us, and I'm going to turn it back over to Joe for a couple of parting words. So again, thank you, and I hope to see you at a future training event. So Joe, over to you.
Okay, thanks, John. And thank you, everyone. As John mentioned, I'm Joe Bukovac. So I'm the one who introduced John and Adrian today. So I'm glad you could attend and actively participate in our CETH course today. And this concludes the course. And again, I want to thank not just you as the audience, but also John and Adrian for another great instruction of all the, they do a great job in all the classes. And I'd like to remind you to complete the feedback survey that's located in the learning environment. And you have 72 hours to complete it so you can download your certificate. So please do that before you go on to your next meeting or the rest of your day. So complete that survey. And your comments in the survey help us as the training team as we create content. And actually, we have several new labs that are be coming out next month. So I think we have about 7 or 8 new labs that are going to be coming out. And also the CDM PMO team looks at your comments as well and helps guide them in what new capabilities they should add to the dashboard. So that pretty much wraps it up. And on behalf of the training team and myself, I'd like to thank you again for attending. And we hope to see you again at a future training event. Have a great afternoon.